Okay, let's unpack this. Before your feet even touch the floor this morning, you've likely invited a stadium of like 50,000 screaming strangers right into your bed.
Yeah.
Just think about that for a second. You wake up, you're still half asleep, and the very first thing you do is reach over to the nightstand, grab a glowing rectangle, and just plunge your brain into, global catastrophes, your boss's urgent demands, and the highly curated highlight reels of people you haven't even spoken to in a decade.
It is a really violent way to wake up when you frame it like that. I mean, you are taking a brain that is literally still transitioning out of delta
The
waves.
deep sleep state, right?
Exactly, the deepest restorative state of sleep. And you are instantly hitting it with a fire hose of high-stakes, emotionally charged information. It guarantees that you start your day in a defensive state of reaction rather than, a grounded state of intention.
And that transition, that jolt, is exactly why we're doing a deep dive into the Digital Minimalism Handbook, Reclaiming Focus and Balance today. If you are listening to this, you're someone who loves to learn, you want to stay sharp. But you probably feel like you are constantly drowning in the sea of information overload. So our mission today is to pull the absolute best insights from this handbook and build a custom-tailored, highly actionable 5-step morning routine just for you. We're constructing a plan to give you your mind back before the world demands it.
And we should probably clarify up front that the underlying philosophy of this handbook is not about running away to the woods and throwing your smartphone in a lake.
Right, no one's doing that.
Yeah, it operates on a very pragmatic principle. Technology is a brilliant tool, but a terrible master. The goal here isn't some monk-like rejection of the digital world. The objective is establishing sovereignty over your attention span.
Which brings us right back to that screaming stadium in the bedroom.
Yeah.
Because you cannot build a foundation of mental clarity if your environment is rigged against you from the start.
No, you really can't.
So, step 1 of the handbook emphasizes this concept of device-free zones, and it specifically targets the bedroom. I look at this as an environmental design choice. Like, you don't have to rely on willpower at 6 a.m. if the phone is physically charging in the kitchen.
Yeah, because willpower is a depreciating asset, especially when you first wake up. And what's fascinating here is the neurochemistry of waking up.
Okay, lay it on me.
But when you open your eyes, your brain experiences the cortisol awakening response.
Which is normal, right?
Totally normal. It's a natural spike in stress hormones designed to just get you out of bed. But when you immediately pair that natural cortisol with the artificial dopamine hit of checking notifications, you're literally wiring your brain for chronic anxiety.
Let's talk about that dopamine hit for a second, because I think people fundamentally misunderstand what dopamine is. Like, we hear it called the happy chemical, but it's actually the molecule of motivation and anticipation, isn't it?
That is a crucial distinction, yeah. Dopamine drives you to seek a reward. So when you reach for your phone first thing in the morning and see like 3 new emails or a dozen likes, you get this unearned, massive spike in dopamine.
Unearned, wow.
Right, because the problem is neurobiological. Once you spike your dopamine baseline that high, that fast, with zero physical or cognitive effort, the rest of your day becomes a dopamine deficit.
Ah, so everything else feels dull.
Exactly. The brain continually searches for that same level of effortless stimulation, which means normal, sustained tasks like reading a report or, having a patient conversation with a coworker, they feel agonizingly boring by 10:00 a.m.
So by making the bedroom a strict device-free zone, you are protecting your dopamine baseline. You are forcing yourself to wake up and just exist in the physical world without that instant artificial crutch. But I mean, I have to admit, the first time I actually left my phone in the kitchen overnight, waking up felt incredibly strange.
How so?
There's this heavy, almost uncomfortable void of stimulation. You sit up in bed, and the silence is just deafening.
Yeah, human nature abhors a vacuum. When you remove a deeply ingrained habit, the brain panics slightly. It wants a target.
Right.
And this is where the handbook transitions into step 2, incorporating quiet reflection and morning silence. If you just sit on the edge of your bed ruminating on the fact that you aren't checking your phone, your brain's default mode network kicks into overdrive.
Now, the default mode network, that's what activates when we aren't focused on an external task, right? Like the wandering mind.
Exactly.
But for a lot of people, a wandering mind goes straight to anxiety. So if you're used to constant notifications, isn't sudden morning silence going to feel, anxiety-inducing?
Oh, it goes straight to threat detection.
Yeah.
The default mode network is evolutionary software. Like when early humans sat around doing nothing, the brain would scan for problems to solve just to keep them
Just
alive.
scanning the horizon for tigers.
Right. But today, that means scanning for social friction, financial stress, or work deadlines. So if you just sit in sudden morning silence, you are very likely to feel profound anxiety. That is why the handbook prescribes structured mindfulness to bridge that gap. Things like deep breathing or gratitude journaling.
See, I used to write off gratitude journaling as a bit, overly sentimental, like a self-help cliche.
Sure, well, a lot of people do.
But if we look at it through the lens of cognitive targeting, it completely changes the utility. How does something like gratitude journaling actually bridge the gap between digital overload and total silence?
Well, it bridges it because you aren't just sitting in a void trying to empty your mind, which is impossible anyway.
Yeah, totally.
You're giving the default mode network a specific positive focal point. You're essentially handing your brain a steering wheel. By writing down 3 specific things you are grateful for, or by actively counting the seconds of an inhale and exhale, you are forcing the prefrontal cortex to take charge of your attention.
Oh, wow. So it's an active process.
Highly active. You are intentionally directing focus rather than letting an algorithm or your own unresolved anxiety dictate it. This active lowering of your baseline stress means that when you eventually do engage with your digital tools, you are approaching them from a state of regulation rather than desperation.
Okay, I love that. So the bedroom is clear. The mind is anchored through a few minutes of directed reflection. The psychological baseline is set. But a calm mind still resides in a sleepy body.
Very true.
And this is where I think a lot of morning routines fail. Like, people try to go straight from meditation to their email inbox.
And that's a mistake.
Right, because the handbook introduces step 3 here. Energizing the body through simple morning exercise and outdoor activity.
Physical movement is the biological alternative to the digital jolt. The text heavily emphasizes simple outdoor activities, walking, cycling, even just spending a few minutes in a garden or a green space. It's presented as a mechanism for emotional regulation, not just, cardiovascular fitness.
I used to think of morning exercise as a chore, like punishment for eating pizza. But within the context of digital minimalism, I've started picturing it as a biological firewall.
That's a great way to put it.
But how does that physical firewall actually block the psychological stress of the digital world?
It goes back to metabolizing those stress hormones we discussed earlier.
Mm.
When you walk outside, your eyes are naturally panning across a physical horizon.
Right.
This lateral eye movement actually suppresses the amygdala, which is the brain's fear center. Furthermore, physical exertion metabolizes lingering cortisol. You are literally burning off the physiological markers of stress. A screen cannot do that.
A screen just pauses it.
Exactly. A screen can only distract you from the stress temporarily, while usually adding to your overall cognitive load at the same time.
And there's also the sensory grounding of being outdoors. When you feel the temperature of the air or the physical exertion of a brisk walk, you are reminding your nervous system that you inhabit a physical body in a physical space. It's like the ultimate countermeasure to that disembodied, floating feeling of being extremely online.
Yeah, the handbook makes a really vital connection here. It notes that this physical grounding naturally reduces the impulse for excessive screen time later in the day.
Wait, really? How does that work?
Because when your nervous system feels regulated and fully engaged with the physical world, the compulsion to mindlessly scroll begins to fade. It loses its grip because you've already satisfied the brain's need for stimulation in a biologically congruent way.
Okay, let's track the progression here. Step 1, we've managed the dopamine baseline by keeping the phone out of the bedroom. Step 2, we've settled the default mode network with quiet reflection. Step 3, we've metabolized cortisol and grounded the nervous system with physical movement. So the body is awake, the mind is clear. But before we open the laptop to start working, there is an intermediate cognitive step the handbook insists on. Step 4. And I've got to say, here's where it gets really interesting.
It's a great pivot.
To survive a hyper-advanced, fast-moving digital era, the ultimate cognitive hack is picking up a physical, low-tech paper book, engaging the brain by reading more and scrolling less.
Yeah, this emphasis on reading more and scrolling less is perhaps the most critical component for sustained mental clarity. The authors argue that excessive digital dependence literally weakens our focus over time. Our neural pathways get physically rewired for short, fractured bursts of information.
I noticed this in my own life. I used to read constantly. Then after a few years of heavy smartphone use, I found that if I tried to read a novel, my eyes would involuntarily dart to the bottom of the page.
Looking for the comments section.
Yes, exactly. As if my brain was looking for a comment section or a like button that didn't exist. My attention span had been completely fractured.
Yeah, that eye darting is a classic symptom of context switching fatigue. When you scroll a feed, your brain is forced to rapidly switch contexts. I mean, you go from a tragic news story to a funny meme to an advertisement to a political argument every 3 seconds.
It's exhausting.
It is. Each switch burns glucose and fragments your attention. Long-form reading operates on the exact opposite principle. It demands a single, continuous context.
It's like putting blinders on a racehorse. You are physically restricting the peripheral distractions, forcing the neural pathways to sustain a single linear track.
That is a highly illustrative metaphor, yeah. Reading a physical book acts as physical therapy for an injured attention span. When you follow a complex narrative or an intricate argument over multiple pages, you are actively strengthening the neural circuits responsible for deep focus and imagination.
It forces you to do the work.
Exactly. The book demands patience. It does not hand you flashing colors or algorithmic dopamine spikes. You have to generate the mental imagery yourself. So by spending even just 15 or 20 minutes reading a physical book in the morning, you are warming up the cognitive machinery required for deep work.
So you are basically putting the brain through resistance training before you ask it to perform on the job.
Right.
Which brings us to the reality of the workday itself. Step 5. Your environment is controlled, your mind is calm, your body is energized, and your attention span is primed. Now, and only now, you actually have to sit down and do your job. The final pillar of this routine is executing the day through scheduled, focused work periods.
Yeah, the handbook frames time management not just as a productivity hack, but as an all-weather necessity in the digital era.
Yeah.
The authors argue that if you don't dictate the terms of your engagement with technology, the technology will dictate the terms of your life.
And the practical application here is creating focused work periods where notifications are turned off, multitasking is severely limited, and your environment is explicitly designed for single tasking.
Yes.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate and jump in with a reality check here.
Go for it.
This sounds idyllic for like a freelance writer or a secluded academic. But what about the person whose entire livelihood is tethered to responsiveness? The IT manager, the customer support lead, the middle manager whose entire day is just a barrage of Slack messages and urgent emails. Telling them to turn off their notifications and do deep work feels like a recipe for getting fired. Is working without notifications even realistic for them?
It's a systemic issue. And to be fair, the authors do not gloss over it. The handbook specifically addresses workplace digital balance and acknowledges that many modern roles absolutely require extended screen usage and rapid communication. The goal is not professional sabotage.
Right, you still need to pay your rent.
Exactly. The goal is organizing the digital demands rather than letting them bleed into every microsecond of your consciousness.
So how does the IT manager practically apply this without dropping the ball on a major server outage?
Through the concept of batching and asynchronous communication, applied within the constraints of their specific role. I mean, if you cannot turn off notifications for 4 hours, can you turn them off for 45 minutes?
Scaling it down.
Right. Can you organize your workflow so that you check email at the top and bottom of the hour rather than leaving the inbox open on a second monitor all day long? It's about building levees against the flood. Even in highly reactive jobs, you can schedule movement breaks, practice strict eye care away from the screen, and eliminate the unnecessary multitasking. You don't have to reject the technology entirely, you just have to contain it.
So you are changing the dynamic from being hunted by your notifications to scheduling an appointment with them. You decide when you check the inbox does not decide when it checks you.
Exactly. It requires a shift from passive consumption to intentional utility. And the handbook provides a rather sobering quote on this front. Time and tide waits for none.
That's powerful.
Yeah, you cannot pause the demands of the day, but you can build a structure that prevents those demands from completely eroding your mental clarity.
So we have this incredible biologically sound architecture for the morning. We established the device-free zone. We use directed reflection to settle the mind. We move the body to metabolize stress. We read to build the attention span. And we execute our work in scheduled, intentional blocks. It all makes perfect logical sense.
It does. But, well, logic is rarely the primary driver of human behavior.
Exactly. I know so many people, myself included, to be honest, who have sketched out a perfect morning routine like this on a Sunday night. We feel incredibly motivated. Monday goes flawlessly. Tuesday is decent. By Thursday morning, we are lying in bed in the dark, bathed in the blue light of our phones, doom scrolling before we've even brushed our teeth.
Yeah, it happens to the best of us.
Why does the architecture collapse so easily? What's missing?
What's missing is the secret ingredient: consistency and a proper understanding of discipline, which the handbook addresses brilliantly in its final chapters. Most people approach digital minimalism through this all-or-nothing mentality. They set an unrealistic standard of absolute perfection. They expect instant, radical transformation.
Right, they want to be a Zen master by Wednesday.
Exactly. And the moment they slip up, the moment they check a social feed in bed on a Wednesday morning, they categorize the entire endeavor as a failure and completely revert back to their baseline habits.
It's the diet phenomenon. You eat one piece of cake, so you decide the diet is ruined and proceed to eat the entire cake.
Precisely the same psychological mechanism. Extreme restriction is inherently unsustainable. The handbook argues that long-term improvement is born from small daily actions, deep self-awareness, and a great deal of patience. If we connect this to the bigger picture, there's a direct quote that acts as the anchor for this entire philosophy. No one can become successful in life without self-control and consistency.
But self-control in this context doesn't mean like white-knuckling your way through the day, fighting the urge to look at your phone every 5 seconds, does it?
No, not at all. It means having the self-awareness to design an environment that requires less willpower, and having the consistency to return to that environment when you inevitably slip up. If you grab your phone in bed on Thursday, you don't abandon the routine. You simply put the phone back in the kitchen on Thursday night.
You just reset.
Yeah. Discipline is a muscle that gets stronger through repetition, not through flawless execution.
I think the real paradigm shift here is how we define the concept of minimalism itself. When you first hear the phrase digital minimalism, it sounds like deprivation. It sounds like you are losing access to information, losing connection, losing the entertainment that everyone else gets to enjoy.
It feels like a punishment.
Yes.
And that feeling of deprivation is exactly what breaks the consistency. But the ultimate thesis of the handbook flips that perspective entirely. Digital minimalism is not about restriction. It is fundamentally about freedom.
Freedom from the screaming stadium.
Freedom.
The complete ebook includes additional exercises, examples, and practical tips. You'll find the link in the description.